You stitch the first row of your pantograph, you've moved the quilt forward, and now comes the bit that makes a lot of new Q-matic owners freeze. How do I tell the computer where the quilt is now? Because the quilt has physically moved, but the design on screen has not magically moved with it. And if you realign to the wrong point or choose a vague spot to realign to, then your next row can end up higher, lower, off center, just not where you expect it to be. In this video, I'm going to show you how to realign your Q-matic between rows without the guesswork. It's exactly the kind of thing that feels a little bit more complicated than what it actually is, because the manual isn't overly clear about how to do this. So let's start by clearing up what Realign Safe Area actually does. When you first start your quilt, you select the safe area, and this tells the machine what it can safely and physically stitch in right now. You want to roll the quilt forward so that your previously stitched row is still visible. You don't want to roll it on so far that you can't find a good realign point from the previous row. Then we need to find a good reference point. Now, what do I actually mean by a good reference point? Firstly, we want it to be as close to the center as possible. I don't want you realigning on the side of your quilt. Now, a good reference point is something that you can clearly identify on the quilt and also clearly identify on the computer screen. So by this, I mean corners. Corners are fantastic. I mean intersecting lines. I mean any kind of sharp point that's easy to recognize on the quilt and then also easy to recognize on the Q-matic. If you're really new to the Q-matic and the BERNINA machine, I would really avoid trying to realign to a curve. It can be done, but it just makes the job a little bit more difficult. Once you've chosen your reference point, you need to move the needle of the sew head directly over that point. So we've got your physical needle sitting over a corner, a sharp point, or an intersecting line. That's as close as possible to the middle of the quilt. You can see in this quilt that I'm doing at the moment, I've selected an intersecting line, and that gives me a really clear place to realign the quilt to. Once the needle is over this point, I'm going to move back to the computer screen. I'm then going to hit the Realign Safe Area button. Once I've done that, I'm going to make sure the second option, that is snap to point, is selected. Once I've selected snap to point, I'm going to find that same point that I've just positioned the needle over on my actual quilt on the BERNINA Q-matic screen. Now remember, this row will be showing up in grey because it's already been completed. The next row, ready to be sewn, will be shown in blue. But we're finding that point from the quilt in the grey row that you've just completed. Once you've found the point, you need to tap it with your mouse. Now, on the mouse, you can zoom right in using the scroll, and so that red point becomes quite large and very easy to see where you're tapping. What I tend to do is tap the point on the screen when I'm fully zoomed out, and then zoom right in to make sure it's exactly in the right spot. Once that red dot is sitting in exactly the same position that you have the needle positioned over on your quilt, hit the tick button. Now Q-matic has realigned the safe area to the new position of your quilt. Now that's the hard job done. Before we press start to quilt that next row, I just want you to check that next row looks like it's in the right position. Is it sitting inside the new safe area boundary? Do you need to trim the edges? Just check where the crosshair of the needle is sitting on your computer screen and make sure it feels like it's in the right place. If you've enjoyed that video and you're still finding your feet with Q-matic, why don't you download my free guide? It's called So You Bought a Q-matic, Now What? It covers only what you need to know to get your first pantograph up and running. You can find the link in the description. And if you've realigned your quilt and everything's going along beautifully, but then your thread snaps, what do you do? I made a video all about that. You can check that one out here. See you next time.